Welcome to the THET-ROH show. This is your host, Keith, Stu, and Tony. Say hello, guys.
Good afternoon, folks.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, we've got an interesting show. We're supposed to be doing 7 and 8. And we're probably going to have to postpone it again because each time we get involved in the whole Creatures of the State series, something else keeps coming up that we need to cover. Now, in the world itself, we've got about 57, 58 countries that are completely Islam. They weren't Islamic before. They were conquered. That's been going on, I guess, for the last 30 to 50 years. And their history is, of course, 1,700 years of it. Now, what we have to talk about is there is one formula on this planet that defeats Islam and the Communist Party that have made an absolute agreement with them to come over and take over the West. This is the Communist Party behind it. It's called a world communism. You can look it up in Title 8, Section 1401 definitions, world communism and totalitarian dictatorship. They actually have that in the US Code. And they warn people of it from a long time ago. So what we want to talk about is, what's the remedy for this? How do we deal with this? Every time somebody says something, you're racist. Every time somebody does something, you're Islamophobic. Every time you do this, every time you do that, blah, blah, blah. It's like you can't win no matter what. You're always going to be the bad guy. Well, there's a way to turn that around. No organization, nation, party, they're not infallible. They're not impervious. So we're going to show you the remedy today. We're going to show you exactly how to handle a situation. First, you have to understand how a communist thinks. So once we get to that, and once you understand how a communist thinks, then you'll be able to defeat and have your freedom. You'll be able to defeat Islam and the Communist Party. I'm going to share screens. And we can talk about classification. Now, classification is a very simple idea. We'll give you we'll look at it here, and we'll give you a few examples, and then we'll move on. Classification is a general process related to categorization, the process in which ideas and objects are recognized, differentiated, and understood. A classification system is an approach to accomplishing classification. That's typical, that's lawyer speak right there. So what we've got here is this. There's all these different classifications. You got media, science, mathematics, business, organization, economics, other uses, organization involved in classification, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So what does this mean? This means that if you see someone robbing a store, you don't identify it as rape or murder. It's a robbery. That's a classification. This is how you recognize, differentiate, and understand a situation. That's how it operates. If you're watching someone mow down a bunch of people in a crowd, that's not a traffic accident. That's murder. That's called mass murder. So when you see police going around and collecting evidence and all these things, what they're doing is they're bringing evidence into a prosecutor so a prosecutor can classify what happened and then determine which statutes apply to that classification. That's all the prosecutor does. We have evidence for this, we have evidence for this, we have evidence for this. And so therefore, this was an actual store robbery. No one was hurt. that falls under this statute here and this statute here, and then this degree and that degree. That's all that's happening before they bring charges. So that's why you see the police officers, you know, running the lines, the yellow lines, and you see like 15 of them around, and then you'll see a guy come in with, no uniform on. He's a detective, and he's looking at the scene and figuring everything out. That's classification. Now, let's move on to international scene. Now, that's in your local area. That's when you have all civilians. There's no other legal title around. It's called, they're all civilians, and they're all, they have a community, and everybody works and goes to work, and then you have your police, and you have your sheriff, and all that kind of stuff. That's just a regular community. Internationally, there's things that look a lot different. In other words, when you see things from country to country, now you have an issue. Now, I'm going to go into this definition of a war crime. A war crime is an act that constitutes a serious violation of the law of war that gives rise to individual criminal responsibility. Examples of war crimes include intentionally killing civilians or prisoners, torture, destroying civilian property, taking hostages, perfidy, rape, using child soldiers, pillaging, declaring that no quarter will be given, and using weapons that cause superfluous injury or unnecessary suffering. Okay, now in 1949, defined new war crimes and established that states could exercise universal jurisdiction over such crimes. Now, locally, you have people that don't understand international law. I've even spoken to attorneys that are state attorneys. They have no idea what international law is. They only understand state statutes. That's it. State statutes do not cover international classifications. So this is the kind of thing you get. After a beheading in Oklahoma, debate over what to call it. They don't know because they don't have a statute that covers it. They have no idea. This was done in September 29, 2014. They still can't do it. And then what do? They go to a president that says, oh, it was a workplace incident. He classified it as a workplace incident, when it was obvious that there was a man that beheaded a couple of people in the workplace. An employee at a food processing plant was fired on Thursday. He went to another part of the facility and attacked another employee with a knife. He killed Colleen Hufford and severed her head, according to a statement from Sergeant Jeremy Lewis. Nolan, who turned 30 last month, and attacked another coworker named Tracy Johnson. Okay, so now, then they said a reserve deputy with Oklahoma County Sheriff's Office since 2010 confronted Nolan and shot him. Killed him. Good idea. That was a good idea to kill the guy. His mother and sister have apologized for the murders. Right here. Okay, more suburb of Oklahoma City, about 58,000 residents have previously been in the news after an incredibly destructive tornado last year killed 24 people and demolished more than 1,000 homes. Let's change the subject, guys. Let's change the subject because you don't want it to be properly classified. Y'all see what I'm saying? You have to change the subject. Now, what does an incredibly destructive tornado have anything to do with a man cutting off a woman's head? The episode and more drew more attention than other incidents of workplace violence because of the nature of this particular attack. There you go. You use the word other. Other incidents of workplace violence. What are you talking about? This is not a workplace violence. That's not what this is called.
Well, it is now.
Well, that's what they said.
Yeah, exactly. That's how they do it right there. You got
Okay.
it highlighted in blue.
Okay. Two American journalists, Stephen Jay and James Foley, have been beheaded by Islamic State militants in Syria recently. Oh, that's not here, though. That's in another country. So obviously that doesn't apply, and there's no way that this would be a militant. See, this man right here, no way he would be a militant. While Algerian militants beheaded a French hostage named Hervé Gordel. These episodes, particularly the deaths of the journalists, drew an incredible amount of attention and were described as acts of barbarism. That's not true. That's not what it was. By President Obama during his speech about launching a campaign to combat Islamic State. Authorities have not called Oklahoma beheading terrorism, instead saying it appears to be a case of workplace violence. There you go. Boom. Now it's being said. This is now classified as workplace violence. It wasn't even terrorism, folks. It was a war crime. And we're going to explain why that is. Television host Joe Scarborough said it was due to political correctness, who is considered another presidential campaign. Now, who declared political correctness? That would be the World Communist Party. They're the ones that started this right here. Political correctness. Can't say certain things. Can't do certain things. We're going to show you why. I think Americans are confused about what this is. Well, you think? And if this is a clear case of an individual going and doing something that doesn't meet their definition of workplace violence, according to The Hill, I think any rational thinking American is going to look at this and go, this is more than just normal workplace violence. Okay, so here's the guy who comes in, Mr. Perry comes in and says, this is a little bit more than that, but we're not going to go there yet. We're not going there. Then they have to go into the officials. Yet these officials also said the FBI had found no link to terrorism. Really? You're absolutely correct, FBI. We're going to agree with you there because it was a war crime, not terrorism. They also said there's no indication that Nolan was copying the beheadings of journalists in Syria carried out by the Islamic State. Instead, the officials said they were treating this as an incident of workplace violence. Okay, remember this. Workplace violence. Remember that, because we're going to get into that here in just a few on what that is. Now, what that means, folks, is you have a bunch of communists that are playing with classifications. They're saying,
and just that.
Go ahead.
I was just going to emphasize, just in that article, which is supposed to be, reporting the event itself. They went into it and they used that label, workplace violence, like 5 times.
Absolutely. To get it in your head, it was just workplace violence. So that will calm you down because they don't want anybody to know what it really was. And this is how they operate under classifications. Right there. This is the tool of a communist. And this is also the tool of Islam. We have a group on where our government meets, and it's called Sharia Law Invalidation Group. We've been working on it for about a month and a half, 2 months. It's an invalidation group. We're going through Sharia law and looking at all of the things that actually don't make any sense. And what we're talking about by invalidation, it's, I'll give you an example. If someone gets pulled over and he's surrounded by 15 cops, and you've got one cop yelling at him to put his hands on the wheel, another cop is yelling at him to roll his window down, another one's yelling at him to open his door, now he's under what they call an impossibility. And now what he's under is he can't comply with any of it because he can't do all 3 at once, which invalidates all of the orders being given to him at the time, which invalidates any action taken by those, any force of action taken by those that are issuing the orders. They can't do a thing. They're stuck. Because you got one guy saying one another. And they're saying, if you don't put your hands on the wheel, we're going to shoot you. He puts his hands on the wheels. The other guy says, open the door. You just said if I don't put my hands on the wheel, you're going to shoot me. Open the door or we'll shoot you. I can't. You're going to shoot me either way. So all orders cancel each other out. That is a lot of Sharia law if you look at it in a civilian point of view. If you look at it as a military point of view, under military classification and military law, Sharia law makes perfect sense. If you look at it from a religious point of view, Sharia law won't make any sense whatsoever. The classification for Sharia law is military law. It's called its military code. And all of them are brought in the return of Islam's child soldiers. You want under Sharia law? You're going in the military. You're going to Islamic military.
Didn't we just read that using children as soldiers was a war crime?
That's right. Yeah, let's go back to that. Using child soldiers right there. And look what you got. That's a war crime, folks. There's your picture of a war crime. Muslim militants continue relying on the same inhumane tactics to terrorize infidels. There you go. They're not terrorizing them. They're committing war crimes against them because they're going into a country and they're attacking civilians. Here's the definition. Torture, destroying civilian property, intentionally killing civilians or prisoners. So we're not, see, if you understand the facts, folks, we're not confused about what to call this. There's no confusion here. There's no debate. That was a war crime because this individual, when he joined Islam and he went under Sharia law, he became a militant. He's part of a military. There was an instance, we were talking about a college, okay? There were like, I don't know, 5 or 6 women in there who were Muslim women that were advocating for Sharia law. And they were Muslim girls, and they're going in there, and then Muslims had this, Muslims had that. And they're in a college. Now, let me say that again. Muslim women in a college advocating for Sharia law, wherein Sharia law does not allow them to go to school. So here's your debate. Were they women in college, or were they college students? That's a classification. Or were they militants in a college trying to recruit all of the college students to a foreign military against their own country? That's, so A, are they college students? Or B, are they militants? Because remember, women can't go to school under Sharia law. So they have to reclassify those girls as militants.
Exactly. There you go. Beautiful example, too. Well done. Well done.
So that's called classification.
Can't go to school because you're a woman, but you can serve the military, and we'll put you in a school environment for recruiting and whatever other nefarious action you can commit.
Okay. Now, here, right here, Here's a warning: graphic images of murdered Christian girl in Libya. Okay. The individuals, photos of Catherine or Katrine. If you don't want your children to watch this, this is a little bit graphic. They have her face fuzzed out. So, but it is a little Christian girl recently murdered with her parents in Libya. Were recently published at Al-Waf. This is a war crime, folks. These are a graphic, and they are necessary to document the virulent hate and animates of the persecution of Christian and Muslim lands. It's not persecution of Christians in Muslim lands, folks. This is war crimes against Christians. We're not Christian here, so we're not going to sit there and say that we're for Christians. We're just looking at this because the THET-ROH show does not take sides. We're just showing you the facts. According to the forensics, the girl was shot close range 3 times, twice in the head. 1 bullet remained lodged and the other came out, and once in the back coming out of her chest. Just because this little girl, who had no choice in her religion or faith, she was a civilian. Look at these 3 little faces. That's a war crime, folks. War crime. Not a workplace incident.
Not a persecution.
Not a religious violation. Islam is a religion, political, and military entity all rolled up into one.
That reclassifies words and redefines them so that they fit into their agenda.
Exactly. And the communists all do that. Now, when this particular thing right here, what did they do, folks? First of all, when crimes are not reported, in other words, war crimes are not reported, you're hiding the war crime. When you see a Muslim man raping a 14-year-old girl, or a pack of Muslim men raping 4-year-old girl, that's not a pack of Muslim men. That is a pack of soldiers. Those are soldiers in an army attacking civilians. Does that make sense? Soldiers in an army attacking civilians and raping them. Just because they don't have a uniform on does not mean they're not military. And just because they're not packing AK-47s doesn't mean they're not military. They're just unarmed military under Sharia law, because Sharia law is a military law. It's a military code for Islam. We know, we read it. You won't believe the mess in there. It's a mess. So you have no debate. Now, this has happened in 57 different countries, and nobody's ever called it a war crime, folks. Does that tell you something? No one has ever said anything about the massive rapes going on in Sweden, the burning of Paris, and those are Islamic military members burning Paris, and the military doesn't do anything. Now, do you understand why the governments can't do anything? Because the governments don't have any jurisdiction over war crimes. The military has the right to stop it and hold those guys accountable, the French military, and they're being told to stand down. So you have the Islamic military coming in and, flooding the gates and everything else, wanting free crap, free this and free that. And we want great, 50 women and the whole deal, what they were promised by Soros. And then they want, then if they don't get it, they start attacking. That's called military war crimes. They're attacking civilians. We're calling it. We're saying it right now here. Military war crimes. That's what it is. Anybody have any objections to that?
No, that's what it is. That's what it always will be.
Yep. Calling it as it is.
Okay, now you got to watch Mexico, because you might want to get warned here. Mexico is to consider the proposal to revoke its treaties with the U.S., including the 1848 agreement that transfer half of its territory to Washington, if Donald Trump is elected and tries to make the U.S.'s southern neighbor pay for a border wall. Be very careful, Mexico, because of the simple fact that you might be declaring every Mexican citizen that is within this territory of the United States of America a part of the military, as part of a military takeover. So therefore, any crimes that they commit while here, they can be classified as war crimes. Be very careful, Mr. Communist Mexico President and Senator. We know who you are. You're a freaking communist country. We know that. The communists are pretty slick if you don't know anything about classifications. You have to know about classifications. If you don't, then you're going to be completely confused no matter what. So, because these little girls did not want to do this, a war crime was committed and this happened. That's sad and that's sick. There's nothing more you can say about that. And those fools in Oklahoma want to debate over what to call it. So what do? They call the Fed. What do we call this? They call it a war crime. That's what you call it.
And of course, they know this.
Absolutely, they do.
Let's get to that point too. They know this. This is all planned out. It's intentional. The vagueness, the reclassification. It's all orchestrated.
Well, that's what the debate is about, how to make a war crime, how to change the meaning and the classification so that they can continue hiding these war crimes.
Right, because they don't want the general public to know that anybody that converts to Islam, you are now a part of a foreign military under Sharia law. Dearborn, it's not a city. It's a military base. Because it's Dearborn, Michigan is under Sharia law. Any people who go under Sharia law, you have joined the military. A foreign military. That's how you lose your, I think they call it what, U.S. citizenship, that classification. It's not even a citizenship, folks. It's a classification. That's what we're trying to tell you. Start looking at classifications.
And that military takes men, women, and children.
Absolutely, they do. Men, women, and children. This guy was a part of a foreign military. Didn't matter who, what, when, doesn't matter. What he is a part of a foreign military who attacks civilians. Two federal law enforcement officials told the Washington Post that, and by the way, the Washington Post is an arm of the Russians. Putin, they pay Washington Post to put crap in there all the time. The Russian government does. That Nolan was a recent convert to Islam with a provocative Facebook page that included a photo of Osama bin Laden right there. Okay, so he joined the foreign military, started attacking civilians. War crimes. Automatically, bam, war crime. War crimes, folks, immediate death penalty. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no, oh, we'll try him for murder or we'll try him for rape and let him go in 3 months. That doesn't work that way. You were aiding and abetting a foreign soldier to kill your own people.
That's just as bad as if they did it themselves.
That's right. And that's what the charter of the judge does. They change classifications. That's why they have to be independent. Anyone under a charter of the judge is a communist judge that fools around with classifications and covers up war crimes. Does anybody ever realize, folks? Let's take a look, guys. This has happened for so long, you don't even notice it anymore. Okay? Has anybody seen a local sheriff with a sergeant patch on him?
Can't say that I have.
Have you seen sergeant on a
Nope.
on a local sheriff? You haven't? You have to go take a look.
Yeah.
Seriously? I have. All of them have it. They have private, sergeant, and most of the sheriffs have little stars on them, little general stars. A lot of chiefs of police, they walk around and they look like they clink. They look like they have, pots all over them. They have so many ribbons and crap on them. Yeah.
They got their ranks on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sergeant stripes. Okay.
Yep.
What in the hell is a civilian officer doing wearing military insignias?
Guess they're not really civilian.
They have absolutely no right to be okay. Can you imagine me or you or anybody else sitting there saying, I'm a sergeant, and start walking around with sergeant stripes on? They look at you like you're crazy. You're not in the military. Sheriffs aren't in the military. Police aren't in the military. What are you wearing military stripes for? You have no business wearing military stripes. When you do, though, your liability goes up. Because if you want to say you're in the military and you're messing around with civilians, don't commit any of these crimes, guys. That's called a war crime. That's it right there. Read it. Okay, destroying civilian property. Taking hostages. Using child soldiers. Pillaging. What are you doing? You're bringing children in and trying them as adults. You're a military organization if you want to use military stripes. If you don't want to do that, take the military stripes off. You're just a deputy. You don't need a sergeant out there to make it look good. You're a deputy and you're a sheriff. That's it. Take the stripes off. No business doing that. Otherwise, declaring that no quarter be given to using weapons that cause superfluous injury or unnecessary suffering. That's called pain compliance right there. That's a war crime, guys. And it's published where? In the Lieber Code in the United States. And at the international level with the adoption of the treaties during the Hague Convention of 1899 and 1907. Now, do you understand, folks, what the communist parties are doing? They're doing these classifications to avoid anybody recognizing that what they are doing is war crimes and covering up war crimes in the mainstream media and the alternative media. The alternative media isn't even covering war crimes. They're not even saying it. They're making fun of the claims of Islam and Muslims. They're making fun of those claims, looking at the ridiculousness of it, but they're not going as far as to say that's a war crime, guys. We're saying it. Anybody have any objections to that?
Nope.
Absolutely not. We'll continue to say it.
Continue to say these are war crimes. So guess what happened, folks? Okay? What did we just say? Now, we just went through this whole thing. What did we just say? They hid a war crime. You see what I'm saying? They hid a war crime. The two federal law enforcement officials hid the war crime. The Washington Post hid the war crime. Texas Governor Rick Perry, who was considered another presidential campaign in 2016, told Fox News that it appears to be an act of violence that is associated with terrorism. No, Mr. Rick Perry, you just hid the war crime. You know it's a war crime. You know that this guy's a militant. You know Islam is a militant. You can call it acts of barbarism and all this other crap all you want. Guess who also hid the war crime? The former president.
What they also did was, by hiding these war crimes, by reclassification, by redefining certain terms, it's like they also set a precedent so that anything else related to this, they can just tuck in under this classification and be done with it.
You got it. That's the best way to say it, man. Then they say, J.M. Berger, a terrorism analyst. You don't need a terrorism analyst. You need to fire this guy. You need a war crimes expert. This guy, totally useless. Fire him. There is no
He's
such
on
thing.
the payroll.
Yeah. Fire him because he knows it's a war crime if he analyzes terrorism and said after the Las Vegas shootings. He knows exactly what it is. He's not stupid. So one of the problems with this inconsistent definition of terrorism is basically, oh yeah, it's an inconsistent definition. So if you're a terrorism analyst, how the hell you have, what do you actually do?
Now finish that sentence, Keith. That's it goes to support our topic here. One of the problems with the inconsistent definition of terrorism is basically, if a Muslim does it, it's terrorism. If a white guy does it, it's not. There you go.
Yeah.
So now you're boxed in, right, with the classification that if you try to define a Muslim behavior as terrorism, they can rebuff it, not logically, of course, but emotionally, and hide the fact that there's motive behind it.
Right. A Muslim, okay, if a Muslim does it, it's terrorism. Okay, right here. Okay, if a Muslim does it. Now, a Muslim wouldn't do that. However, a Muslim under Sharia law is not a Muslim. He's a part of the military. And he would do it, and it's not an act of terrorism, it's a war crime. If a white guy joins Islam and does this, that's called a war crime. So look at CBS, NBC, Fox, everybody else on there. You guys are all hiding war crimes, folks. Every one of you are doing it. Swedish government is doing it. The German government is doing it. The French government's doing it. The English government's doing it. You're all hiding war crimes. And the funny thing is, if these people were so big and bad and they were so powerful, and why the hell people are afraid of them, I have no idea. But if they were so big, bad, and powerful, they wouldn't be attacking 14-year-old girls, 12-year-old girls, 9-year-old girls, violence, raping them. They wouldn't be killing them. They wouldn't be doing any of that. We watched a video the other day. 17-year-old girl took 30 soldiers, Muslim men soldiers, by the way, to kill this girl and then burn her body because she was accused of burning a Quran. I'll give you another example. Guess what? 2 days later, she was found innocent. She never burned the Quran. Give you another example. Desertion is death penalty. Anybody in the U.S. military, if they desert, that's the death penalty for desertion. What happens when you leave Islam? Death penalty. You'll see where we're getting to now? Is this going to get past your Islamophobia stuff? Death penalty. If you leave Islam. That's a military installation, folks. That's a military state. You have 58 military states. Egypt is now one of them. You have the former regime in Washington, D.C. that basically overthrew, I don't know how many countries to establish democracy. All of them ended up in the hands of Islam. Every one of them did. And they hid the war crimes that followed. That's exactly what happened. So you have a J.M. Berger, okay? His great addition to this whole story was Berger said in an interview in June, says if a guy in Santa Barbara said Jews instead of women and said Allahu Akbar in his video, it would be called terrorism. Well, that's really good there, Berger. You just are now guilty of hiding and or aiding and abetting in war crimes. If you hide war crimes, folks, you're aiding and abetting war crimes. So keep it up, journalists. Keep it up, editors. You're aiding and abetting in war crimes. On a prayer and on the promise of blue sky that the communists are going to win, and when they're the victors, they're going to write the history. And of course, they never committed any war crimes. And they never hid or aided and abetted any war crimes. Because they're writing the history. They're not going to witness against themselves. And that's how it operates. Now you understand what's happening to America. North America. A lot of it's
one more thing I'd like to throw in here as a little discussion, shed some light. Isn't it interesting that this article that we've been examining is debating, evaluating, considering war crime, terrorist act, things like that? Shouldn't that be done by the War Crimes Tribunal judges, the magistrates?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we having these types of evaluations made by Jay Berger and a bunch of people that really know nothing about it? They're supposed to be gathering evidence. They're supposed to be compiling facts, not putting out legal opinions
or communist propaganda.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was building to. Right.
That sounds more accurate.
Yeah. Communist propaganda, folks, is basically hiding war crimes. That's where the term came from. That's why they call it, oh, that's just communist propaganda. They're hiding war crimes. They committed the war crimes. That's why communists were hated so much, and they still are. Because they commit war crimes, and then they hide it. Because they're little wussies. They like to attack civilians. It makes them feel powerful because they're essentially criminals. They like to do stuff like that. They like to rape. They like to do all these things. This is where all this stuff came from. Taking hostages, perfidy, rape, using child soldiers, pillaging, declaring that no quarter will be given, torture, destroying civilian property. They love doing this. Look at Paris. Intentionally killing civilians or prisoners. They love that because they don't shoot back. You don't see any of those Islamic militants that came in. They're not immigrants, folks. They're Islamic militants. They're military that came in. And people tried to tell people over and over again, but they didn't go into the classification so people would understand what they're talking about.
Instead, they just opened the gates wide open
to a massive military that came in that started attacking civilians.
Yep.
And destroying civilian property. Those are war crimes. They're so wussy, they won't attack the military of that country. They go after girls, 14, 15-year-old girls, 90-year-old women. They don't care.
But don't get caught speaking out against that, because then you're called an Islamophobe.
Yeah, and that is a communist, what do you call it? It's a communist ploy. That's called communist propaganda.
Yep.
Islamophobia is communist propaganda through and through from the beginning to hide war crimes, to deal with classifications. Right here. Okay? Communists love attacking little girls. They love it. They think that they get off on that. Okay? Now, in order to hide the war crimes, they got to start them at this age. So that they, in that mind, does not understand what a war crime is.
We're getting desensitized.
Yeah. And look at the trainer over here. War criminal. That's why they wear all black. That's what communism is. It's all black when they wear all that stuff. Okay? So, this is what they wanted to do. Now, what kind of individual will sit and shoot or could do that to a little girl like that? Think about that. Just for 5 minutes. Just think about that. Okay? And what kind of guy would just walk in and just cut women's heads off? What kind of thinking is that? That's called war criminal. It's not for any political gain. It's not even for self-defense. It's for fun because you can, because nobody's there to stop you. They look at that as being fun. That's what war criminals do. We have war crimes going on in this country every day. And we're going to start notifying people of it. We're going to start showing it. War crime number 1, war crime number 2, because nobody's saying anything. We're waiting for the alternative media and the media to say something. And nobody's saying a word. And hasn't been saying the word for the last 30 to 50 years. Nobody's called anything war crimes. Intentionally, a military, military soldier intentionally attacking civilians. 6,000 war crimes in the past year in Sweden alone. 2 days ago, Paris, France, dealt with war crimes. And nobody's saying a word. Why? Because they have communists in charge over there. Whenever you see anyone coming up and a war crime is very clear to you, this is how you identify a commie. The commie will come in and start reclassifying something. That's what he was taught. He does that because, or she does that because they think you don't know about it. They call reclassification, in order for you not to know what reclassification was, they call that political correctness. So you wouldn't understand it. And you couldn't legally touch them. They hide the truth. That's how slick they are, but they're not slick enough. Not slick enough. That, my friends, you start talking about war crimes, you start identifying war crimes, you start identifying correctly what people really are, the communists and Islam will go down. Nature demands it. What comes around goes around. Anything else we have to add, folks? Hey, guys, you want to add anything?
No. Good show. Good content.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for listening to the THET-ROH show. Please tune in next week. We might get to 7 and 8 of the creatures of the state. We don't know yet. Thanks for joining us.
See you next week, folks.
Want to say goodbye, Tony?
Yep. Good night, everyone.